I call to order the City of Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals for September the 19th, 2024. Roll call, please. Did you hear me?
Joe Throckmorton.
Here.
Tim Ballard.
Here.
Barry Clapper.
Here.
Flavia Burrell.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. We do have some minutes for approval this evening, but I'm going to ask if it is okay to table them. We will, because I didn't have a chance to look at them, and I don't think that Flavia did either. So that's okay? We'll table them?
Do we have to make a motion on that?
Do we need to make a, I don't believe we have to make a motion to table minutes.
Hang on, sorry, we're catching up.
Oops. Okay. Let me try this one.
What was it? Oh, they're checking the bylaws.
Yeah.
Okay.
That one should be fine, right? These are, it's the mic. Try it now.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Not great?
Well, I'm talking about all side by side in the same image. So this since 2020, this is the first time. I'm gonna mark that down as a day to remember. I'm sorry.
Mic should be red.
We can,
Might drop my kids off.
That's better. Much better. Okay. Great. Okay, so we are going to table the minutes for this evening. Is that okay? Do we need to do any special motion or anything in particular?
I don't believe that there's a motion necessary to table the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any reports, resolutions, and communications this evening?
Nothing from staff.
Okay. Then, this evening, I'm going to list the petitions first to be continued. Those petitions to be continued to the October 17th meeting are Joe Kemp Construction, LLC, and Blackwell Construction, Inc. Sorry, that's AA-17-22. The next case, V-27-22, is Cutters Kirkwood 123 LLC. Then V-23-24, Scott and Susan Slavin. And lastly, V-27-24, Keith Clay. There's one petition to be continued to the November 14th meeting, and that is V-2624, Alicia Spear. And this evening, we have one petition, that is CU-17-24, Bloomington Builders LLC and Latitude 39 North Properties LLC. We are ready for the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. So as mentioned, this is a request from Bloomington Builders LLC and Latitude 39 North for a property at 506 East Wiley Street. The petitioners are here requesting conditional use approval to allow a dwelling, duplex use in the residential small lot zoning district. So this petition has been heard twice now. So this is the third hearing for this location and this petition. This property is zoned residential small lot R3, and the petitioners are requesting to redevelop this currently vacant lot with a duplex dwelling unit. So as I mentioned, this lot is currently vacant. There is a large tree on the center of the site. There are existing single-family houses to the west and the east and the north, and the petitioner would like to redevelop this with a duplex. So as I mentioned, this has been heard twice. And the petitioner has made a few changes to the petition, namely the overall arrangement of the site in terms of location of parking. On the left side of your screen here, you can see the previous arrangement with parking on the left side, on the east side of the building. The petitioner has switched that location in order to allow for a longer, deeper driveway that places the parking on the back side of the building in a designated pull-off space. The petitioner has also redesigned the front of the building and the overall elevations to reorient the gables and the roofs so that those slope toward the street to better match some of the existing adjacent structures along the street. It was noted previously that all of the rest of the structures along here had the roofs sloping towards Wiley Street. So the petitioner redesigned the project and the building in order to match that design. So this is the previous elevation. So you can see the previous design where the gable ends faced the street. And then, as I mentioned, they have redesigned that towards have the roofs sloping towards the building. So the building still has 3 bedrooms on each side. It is still a 2-story structure. There are doors and the elevations for the house still face the street with the sidewalk connection. And so the overall elevations on the sides have changed as well to reflect this redesign for the building. And so the petitioner, as I said, had made these changes to try to address some of the comments that have been heard from the board at the last meeting in regard to compatibility and similar design elements for this to match the other existing buildings along the street. So the conditional use approval does have several standards that are outlined in the staff report. One of those deals with the specific use-specific standards for duplexes. So the UDO specifically lists 4 design elements of duplexes that should be similar in general shape, size, and design with the majority of other existing single-family structures on the same block face. So those 4 elements are roof pitch, front porch width and depth. So the redesign of this building still has front porches that are approximately 4 feet in depth. Has a similar width to other adjacent porches within this block. Front building setback, the building has been placed at the front build-to line. In the R3 district, it is required to have the building 15 feet from the proposed right-of-way, so the building has been placed at that building setback line. Vehicle parking access, there is a wide mix of parking arrangements along Wiley Street. All of those, there are not alleys along Wiley Street to access parking. So all of the houses along here do feature a driveway on the front for parking. So this design is similar to that. However, they have moved the majority of those parking spaces back behind the structure to better kind of conceal those from the road, but does certainly provide all of the required parking. And then the other 2 use-specific standards are that they cannot contain more than 6 bedrooms total, which this meets, and that each individual dwelling unit shall have separate utility meters, which again, this meets as well. So in the review criteria, in addition to the use-specific standards, there are also the general compliance criteria that again reference the use-specific standards, compliance with utilities and service standards. CBU has indicated there's no issues with providing water and sewer service to this location. Consistency with the comprehensive plan, again, is something that has to be evaluated. The comprehensive plan encourages infill development and infill development and reuse of underutilized properties, which this also accomplishes. There are existing utilities to easily connect to. This is adjacent to a public park, so this is a good location for a duplex use. As I mentioned, there are adequate adjacent public services and facilities to access this property. And then the last criteria for conditional uses deals with minimizing or mitigating adverse impacts. We have not identified any adverse impacts as a result of this use at this location. There are no regulated natural or scenic features. I did mention that there is a tree that is in the center of the property, that unfortunately due to its location would not able to be saved. There are a few trees that are on the perimeter of the property that at this time have been identified to be saved. So they have been able to work with keeping some of the existing vegetation on the property. And then this would be constructed in one phase. So we did find that this does meet the use-specific standards. As I mentioned, the 4 specific design elements, similar roof pitch, front porch width and depth, building setback and parking are all very similar in design to the existing adjacent residences along this block face. So we are recommending approval of this request with the 2 conditions that are listed in staff's report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric. Can the petitioner or petitioner's representative please step to the podium? Okay, if you could please state your name.
Kaylin Evans.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have up to 20 minutes to present your petition.
Thank you. Just a few quick things to add. Thanks, Eric, for the overall presentation there. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to come back, take one more stab at this petition. It was kind of a quick turnaround time with the revision deadlines and the holiday in there, but we basically went back to the drawing board here and kind of started from scratch, both in the site plan and overall design of the building. So as Eric mentioned, it is really a completely new design of the actual duplex itself. As he mentioned, it is a 3-bed, 3-bath duplex dwelling, so 3 beds, 3 baths on each side. We've done a lot with the roof lines and kind of the height to the previous iteration was really a full 1.5 story, so the first floor and the second floor were the same footprint. We've broken that up so that kind of the front portion of the building is still at 2 stories, but about a third of the rear of the building is only 1 story, so more of a blended 1- and 2-story overall massing. We've enlarged the open concept kind of living, dining, kitchen area, so there's a larger shared living space in this configuration. There's dedicated utility rooms in that plan, something a little different than the previous iteration was more of a kind of a stacked closet, hallway, laundry center that having a dedicated space for those utilities, just more family useful spaces in this orientation. We've put a lot more, I think, a greater sensitivity to the street and block face presence. So the porches, if you'll remember in the previous iterations, especially the rear unit when they were in that more shotgun orientation, the rear unit had a pretty small front porch, really just more of a covered stoop, and set quite a bit further back from the street, being in that shotgun orientation. So by bringing the 2 units more side by side, that brings the whole building more up to that build-to line at the street. Both units then now have a much larger porch that I think engages the streetscape and engages the public realm better than the last iteration. As Eric mentioned, the roof pitch, the gable pitches, all kind of oriented broadside to the street, so the building itself is wider to the street and shallower with a number of different gables all facing the street, including those porches at the lower level gable facing the street. We narrowed the driveway significantly, so there was that kind of double wide shallow drive configuration that would leave parking right up on the street, really where you'd be kind of backing out onto the street. So a much narrower driveway. It is deeper, but that's allowed us to kind of shift the parking to the back side of the building and hide it really from the streetscape, pull it further away from the streetscape. Outside of that, as Eric had mentioned, this, all the changes that we have made still meet the specific design standards regarding roof pitch, front porch width, depth, building setbacks, and vehicular parking access. And I kind of want to add that, back to this idea that a duplex and middle housing is really the most incremental increase in density that the UDO allows, just going from where there would otherwise only be one single-family home allowed here by right to go to two is modest density, but this kind of middle housing is what I believe we need to allow two families, two tenants where there would otherwise only be one. And just to note that the UDO, we've worked very closely with Eric on this, very closely with planning, and that the UDO is our law. It is our ordinance, hundreds of pages of it in all its glory, and it's comprehensive, it's explicit in its rules and regulations, and we've worked very hard to try to meet all those standards in this design. So with that, I believe that our petition meets those standards, and ask for your approval of this petition and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are to the board for questions. Flavia, do you have a question? No? Anybody?
I'll just ask really quickly, since you brought it up and the by right scenario. If this weren't to happen, how big of a house could you put on that lot?
If we're looking at square footage, theoretically, based on setbacks and height requirements, there's a 35-foot height maximum, so 3 stories would really be your cap there. Other than that, respecting the setbacks, a single-family home of, potentially 5,000-6,000 square feet is technically feasible on that lot. It would probably be pretty ugly, in my opinion, but in theory, by right, it could be done.
Right, okay. So 5,000 to 6,000, 3 stories, probably sell 750, 800,000?
I would say that's accurate for that neighborhood,
Okay.
yeah.
For
For a single-family home.
right, for a single-family home?
Yep.
Okay, all right, that's it, thank you.
Sure.
No questions? I have a question about the access drive. So what you presented last time was along the east property line, and now it has migrated to the west property line. And my understanding was that it was positioned on the east side because of a sensitivity that the neighbor had in your discussion with them, and that was a response on your part.
Right.
So could you talk a little bit about why it's shown differently?
Yeah, the biggest driver from that, and I don't think it's on the site plan, but there is actually a overhead telephone line within the bounds of our property. There's a telephone pole across Wiley Street to the neighbor to the north, and then the next telephone pole is basically that was basically limiting the depth of that driveway on the previous orientation. Yeah, actually, there you can kind of see. You can see the street sign there. There you go, Eric. Yeah, there's a telephone pole there that's set into our property line about 10 feet, and so there is no way to get that driveway around that telephone pole. There's not enough lot width to move the building far enough to the west to permit the drive to work around that side of the house. So,
So there's a public utility on the lot?
yes.
Eric, is that something that you typically see, and how is that handled?
Well, certainly electric lines have kind of been run through neighborhoods very haphazardly over the years in terms of getting access to adjacent properties. Whether or not there's an easement or not for the electric line, I don't know. The property owner just has to work around those utilities or pay to move them. Our experience has been it's usually pretty expensive to move a utility line since there's not a house on this property. It doesn't serve this property and serves obviously an adjacent off-site property. But that's about the extent of what I guess I know about that.
Okay, and so that is inside the lot line, and that is what's inhibiting the ability for the drive to continue to the south?
Correct. That's the primary hindrance of locating that drive on the east side. The other thought process behind the flipping back to this kind of orientation, and that original site plan, the parking spaces were still shallow into the lot, so those cars would have been parked. That driveway area was very, very close to the house itself next door. That house kind of has an L shape, and the back portion of it is set further to the west. So by moving the cars, the actual parking spaces now are still further back and are not right there adjacent to that house next door. Eric, would you happen to have that, an aerial again with the satellite imagery handy? Perfect, thank you. So you can see the house immediately to the west is what we're looking at here. So to the left of the lot on the screen, that L shape, the northeastern L in the original first iteration from May, that's where that driveway would have really been 4 parked cars right there next to that bump out that really encroaches into, nearly hits the property line. So the parking is now all the way to the south end and then turned back to the east, where that neighboring house itself is still not as close to those parking spaces.
Okay. And then I had another question for you about the roof form. So you, just one of the decisions that was made from the difference from the previous design, and that was that initially there was a 1.5-story house where the roof line, that eave line comes down, but it was, in the perpendicular orientation.
Right.
And now there's the roof, which the gable is broadside to the street, parallel to the street, but we're at a 2 full story. Why did you leave the 1.5-story concept behind?
In our approach, we thought the porches kind of being a little deeper, that broke up the height, even being at a full 2-story, and that full gable, not really an attic with a dormer gable, was still in keeping with the gables of the houses next door.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so then, Mr. Hiddle, since this is a continuance, we have new material in front of us. Would we typically allow public comment as usual?
I believe that's the case. Heather Lacy, you might want to chime in if you have a different thought, or Eric.
Yes, there would still be public comment. Even though this was a continuance, it's still a hearing that would have public comment, so that everybody from Devolvic would still have their 5 minutes.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we're to public comment. Is there anybody in chambers or online who would like to speak to this petition? This is your opportunity. If you could step to the podium and sign in, and then you'll state your name and I'll swear you in. You state your name, please?
My name's Jan Sorby.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm here tonight to ask you to please deny this conditional use permit. The UDO states a new duplex shall be similar in general shape, size, and design, with a majority of the existing dwellings on the block face. During the first meeting on this project, BZA member Nikki Farrow voted against this petition because the building didn't meet that mandate. She stated that the roof was inappropriate and the size was way too big. Although the roof has changed, the new design has grown even bigger, and it still does not meet that mandate. At the last BZA meeting, the size was questioned, and Mr. Evans cherry-picked which properties to compare his building to. He did not stick to the block face or even Wiley Street. So using information on the GIS, I totaled all the square footage of the 9 properties on the south side of Wiley, and the average is 1,523 square feet per, that's the average. Mr. Evans' new building is approximately 3,040 square feet. It is very close to twice as big as the average of all the houses on the south side of Wiley. The comp plan states vacant lots should be redeveloped with compatible infill reflecting the prevailing character. Mr. Evans' design fails the goal of the comprehensive plan too. Pattern, size, and shape are the basic elements of compatibility. They define the basic relationship between the new and the old. Infill should not overpower the nearby structures. I've said this before, but I'll repeat it again tonight. This is not a political decision. It must be solely based on code. Code is very clear. A new duplex shall be similar in general shape, size, and design with the majority of the existing dwellings on the block face. I grew up in duplexes, and I support this form 100%. But if we accept a design that doesn't reflect code and doesn't fit the context of the street, I fear we may very well hinder the acceptance of this important form. Thank you for your time. Please deny this request.
Thank you. Anyone else in chambers this evening who would like to speak?
My name is Pat, P-A-T, Midland, M-E-D-L-A-N-D.
Okay, do you do a signature?
Yeah.
Okay, right here. Very good.
Okay.
Good evening, my name is Pat Medland. My wife and I live immediately to the south of the proposed building.
Okay.
So I heard,
I just need to swear you in, and then you can
oh,
continue
I'm
with your
sorry.
comments.
I swear.
That's fine. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, you have 5 minutes, up to 5
Okay.
minutes.
My name is Pat Medland. My wife and I live immediately to the south of the proposed duplex. I smiled briefly as a comment was made about buildings to the north, east, and west. We're there too. Couple of thoughts. First of all, and a couple of comments. There's mention of the beautiful sycamore tree that is there. Well, as of yesterday and today, it's on its way down. You know, I get that that's how new development goes. I have several major concerns, but I'll just mention 2. The parking is a major one. Wiley Street is a narrow street. While there may be space for however many tenants there are in this duplex, they are not likely to back in and out regularly. It's too hard. So I think it's very likely that Wiley Street will have more vehicles that are viable for it. It's just a narrow street. The other thing that was mentioned that I absolutely agree with. It does not meet the character of the neighborhood. We have a neighborhood of small houses. There is an apartment, as a matter of fact, the Bender Apartment's right next to us, which predated most of the houses that were there. It has it has enough parking that works well. The duplex is scrunched in, and there is, in terms of just aesthetics, which I suppose is not mentioned in the code, but in terms of aesthetics, it is just out of place, and that's a concern. Finally, living, it would be more or less literally in our backyard. The room between that building and our backyard, the space, would change how that block works. And we have other neighbors who have commented on the same thing. So I hope that at a minimum, you request a redesign, smaller, and hopefully, well, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
My name is Jim Opiate.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, you have up to 5 minutes.
Okay. While there's been some parking on the north side of Wiley, and there's not a lot, there's no shoulder on that side of the road. Where the pavement ends, there's a sharp drop-off, 10 feet or more. It's a dangerous situation. I'm surprised that the city has done nothing to try and fix that over the years. I can only assume it's because there's not much demand for on-street parking at the moment. But once we add 6 new bedrooms to that stretch of Wiley, there's bound to be more on-street parking. And so my question is to Eric. Is the city planning to put in guardrails or some kind of barrier to keep cars from going over the hill and down that 10-foot drop? And how come parking is still allowed on that side of the street? Wouldn't it be wise to make that no parking along the north side? That's it.
Thank you. Okay. I think I'm going to take a break and ask if there's anybody online.
Can I get a reply from Eric?
There'll be an opportunity for him to answer the question later. Typically during public comment, we just hear public comment. Mr. Hiddle, do we have anybody online who would like to speak to this petition?
I am not seeing anybody. If there is anybody on the line that would like to speak, please use the raise hand function, and we can recognize you. I'm not seeing anybody.
Okay, great, thanks. We'll just continue here in chambers then. Okay. Your name, please?
Mary Coy.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, up to 5 minutes.
I was going to speak and not speak and speak and not speak. It's not really my thing to do public speaking. However, I also live next to Pat and Sue to the south of the property. As we park in front of our home, facing west, we drive down Dunn Street to go east. So we turn onto Wiley, and it's a difficult turn to make, and there are always cars parked on that side of the road. So even driving down that street, and they're not neighbors, they're not always the same cars. So that's Wiley in that first block is utilized by other people. And I think it would be difficult to back out of a parking space into that when there's one car width beside those parked cars. When a mail truck is parked there, it's a really tight squeeze. If a car is parked there, for instance, in one case it was a Prius was parked there, so not too wide, but must have had passengers because they parked probably a foot away from the drop-off to let their passengers out. So they were further out into the street. So there is 2 car widths. I'm not sure if a fire truck could get down the street with cars parked there. The other thing I would want investigated is that we live near that telephone pole in question. And I thought when we bought our home in 1989, and I think that was in our deed, considered a vacated alley. But it was not, it was an easement, as I believe. And I don't think that if we were to build a garage on the back of our property, we could go all the way to that pole, that that's not our property, that there is a space there that does not belong to us, and we would have to be further away from the edge of that easement. Perhaps that's not the case, I'm not sure, but I thought that might have been in there. So I would ask for an investigation of that before that property space of a possible easement is claimed by this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Lawrence is my name.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Excuse me. So good evening. My name is John Lawrence, and I'm the president of the Bryan Park Neighborhood Association. I'm not representing the neighborhood tonight, though I've been the main point of contact on this project. And I will reiterate that when the petitioner came and presented to our neighborhood meeting in May, there were approximately 40 people in attendance. Only one person at that meeting was supportive of the project, and that person has since changed his mind. The neighbors' lack of support was not about it being a duplex. It was a lack of compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood, a huge 6-bedroom, 6-bath structure that does not fit in this block. And I want to add in here on my prepared comments that we're down to, it looks like about 8 or 9 neighbors. We were up to approximately 20 the last time. This is our 4th time to come here. One time we came and there wasn't a quorum. So unpaid neighbors get worn out. I don't think it expresses their concern about this. I don't think people are thinking any differently. They just are tired of coming out 4 times. So I think there's still a lot of concern in the neighborhood. So I'm here tonight to ask you to deny this petition. And let me be clear, I do not oppose duplexes in neighborhoods. We have quite a few already in the neighborhood. They mostly blend in seamlessly. But the reason that Bloomington changed the code to allow duplexes was to create more affordable housing. This petition does not in any way help solve that problem. So what's wrong with this project? You've already heard most of it, the problems from my neighbors, so let me recap. Number 1, it's too big and it doesn't fit the character of Wiley Street. At the previous hearing, the petitioner was given sound advice on how to solve the problem. Look to the neighborhood for how people have added square feet by adding onto the back of their houses. Instead, the petitioner kept the 2 stories, changed the roof, and made it bigger. It's much bigger than any house on the block face. Number 2, parking is going to be a huge problem. Wiley is narrow, as you've heard from other neighbors, especially on this block. The petitioner is even admitting it's a problem by suggesting permit parking. You are not supposed to pass a petition knowing that it will harm the neighborhood. And number 3, this project does not provide affordable housing. I ask that you deny this petition. Not only is this the wrong thing for this particular location, I worry that passing this tonight will embolden future developers to build unsuitable projects elsewhere. We need more affordable housing. We have plenty of luxury student rentals. And since I have a little time left, I just got a note from a neighbor that couldn't stay for the meeting, so I'd like to read it. This is from Diane Young from the Bryant Park neighborhood. And I'm only now reading this, so excuse me if I stumble a few places. A show of good faith seems to me to be similar to an effort of minimizing such things as in this case as minimizing adverse impacts to surrounding properties and making efforts to address concerns of adjacent properties. There have been concerns by adjacent property owners as well as property owners in the immediate area and have expressed concerns that do not seem to have been addressed with this new proposal. I'll grant that this new design does seem to create a more livable interior gathering space. It is, however, at the expense of creating a blueprint that I believe is overall larger than the previous proposals and does not offer enough to address the very significant problems with parking and traffic that have been mentioned by many in the immediate area as already a problem and danger. It seems to be an obvious and easy solution to simply design this duplex with 2 bedrooms rather than 3 on each side. If this were done, it would make it easier to design a more homey style duplex to fit nicely in this neighborhood, allow for more parking on the property rather than in the already overcrowded and dangerous street, and be more considerate of the existing neighbors. It is hard to understand why this option isn't being considered, and the only conclusion that I can imagine is that it's because the owner is only considering options from the perspective of how much profit can be made, which is as much as possible. In this sense, I do not consider this to be a show of good faith, and I ask again that you not approve of this proposal as is. Thank you. And that was from Diane Young.
Thank you.
My name is Deborah Meyerson.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
I appreciate the opportunity to share my public comment tonight. I am a homeowner in Elm Heights, and I'm commenting that I'm a homeowner because this is about a rental property. I would encourage the board to consider how many renters you've heard from in the current and past hearings on this property. Because the people who may live here are not the people that you're hearing from. The staff has recommended approval, and I recommend your approval of this petition as well. It's consistent with the UDO and the comprehensive plan. Again, staff, they are here to comply with the UDO and the comp plan, and they have recommended this and the previous plans. This plan has been completely redone, and they're still recommending it. A single-family home here could be built by right. It could have 6 bedrooms, 6 baths. You would not hear a word about it because it's a single-family detached home, which is actually the most expensive type of housing that can be built. So I encourage you to, again, accept this proposal. It helps to diversify the housing in the city of Bloomington. It does not necessarily create more affordable housing because, as we know, holding costs and regular public hearings of returning several times and redoing design plans do increase the cost of housing. But if you approve this today, you are approving 2 homes instead of 1 that provide opportunities for 2 households to live in a high-resource, high-opportunity neighborhood that's close to schools, parks, shopping, and jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Eric, is there anybody on Zoom one last time?
No, I still do not see anybody with their hand raised. Once again, if there's anybody online that would like to make a comment, please use the raise hand function and we can recognize you.
Okay.
Yeah, I still do not see anybody.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak to this petition? If not, we are back to the petitioner for any further comments. You have a lot of time remaining.
Okay, I'll just take a few moments to address a couple of items from the comments I think I'd like to point out, and then leave it open to any questions from you guys. The first comment from Ms. Sorby, dealing with context and scale and size here, and comparing to that block face, and using the 9 homes along the south side of Wiley Street as another comparison sample size-wise, and I think she estimated 1,523 square feet as an average square footage of those 9 homes on the south side of Wiley. Here, we're at approximately 1,500 square feet per dwelling unit, per side of this dwelling, per side of this duplex. You can't compare the size of a duplex to the size of a single-family home. In my opinion, it's generally going to be bigger. If you look at each unit on its own for a family, for a group of tenants, it is in scale, 1,523 versus 1,500. That was really the point I was trying to make with, I think, the 5 that I included last time, and have some specs on size, 5 looking at kind of both sides of it and the north side of the street to say this is, if we're looking at size, square footage is a consideration, building height, allowable height. The UDO limits size by regulating the height. It limits size by regulating setbacks, impervious area. All those are objective ways that the UDO restricts size. So to say it's just simply too big is an opinion. The UDO has very explicit language on what is too big for this language and for this use. So we have looked at that context of the neighborhood. There are 2-story homes directly across the street, just a few, not the next door to the west, but 2 doors down, 4 or 5 doors down. So size, context, I appreciate those comments. We have really tried to look at neighborhood context, but when it comes to size, I just fall back to the UDO and highlight there are several ways explicitly that the UDO regulates size, and we meet those size standards. Obviously, parking, we've beat this one extensively too. I think this proposal with the driveway is better than the previous, getting the cars further away from the street. That site plan, there's a turnaround. So the cars coming out of the driveway can turn around and then pull straight on out into Wiley Street instead of having to necessarily back out into Wiley Street. So adding that turnaround was right to that point of trying to make it safer to get in and out of the street. The street parking is, I mean, honestly, it's out of my control. The street parking exists there. That particular condition, there is some slope right there on the north side of Wiley Street off of the street to the north. As I mentioned, I think in the first hearing, I would be supportive of permitted parking along this street. It's, some of the neighbors are noticing that some of the cars are people that don't even live on this street. If there's anyone that should enjoy that on-street parking right in front of your property, I think it's the owners or the tenants in that property, but the street parking does exist there. Will it be utilized? Probably. Should it be utilized if it's there? I think it should be. I think the owner or the tenants there should enjoy access to that parking. We've tried to provide, we've provided the maximum parking available on site, so we've done what we could there. And just lastly, to say on parking, it's still completely speculative to guess how many cars will be there. 3 bedrooms per side. I have several, I've mentioned other properties in Bryant Park and in adjacent neighborhoods that a 3-bedroom home is occupied by a young couple with 3 kids. They have 1 car. They have 5 bikes. They bike commute. They have their 1 van. So even in the events of students, I have other student rentals where there's 1 or 2 cars where there are 3 or 4 tenants. So it is it's a consideration. We have to think about it, but the UDO does limit the minimum parking and the maximum parking on site. We are within those requirements and have tried to design the driveway conscientious of those neighbors' concerns. The other point, major point on affordability, if the duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes were adopted into the UDO explicitly for an affordability motive, there were not any explicit affordability requirements put into those use-specific standards. I do strongly believe that duplexes are more affordable than a single-family development. Last night, city council meeting, there was a presentation by the gentleman with this, I think it's Summit Hill Land Trust, and city council asking them what would be more helpful for you to support affordability. One of his points was more use of duplex, triplex, and fourplex, that if we could, more duplexes, more triplexes, fourplexes are helpful to affordability, not against it. So again, getting 2 where there is 1, I think is a win for affordability. But back to the UDO, there is no explicit UDO requirement for affordability for a duplex. There are affordability requirements for different incentives for large developments, so that language could be there, but is not explicitly there. And then just lastly, a couple of points about attendance, both whether it's supportive of or against the project. After 3 hearings, both sides are wore down too. There have been the last 2 meetings more voices in support with good points as well too. Both sides of that are taken into consideration, but I think after 3 hearings, there's fewer on both sides. So, but I appreciate their comment either way, and the opportunity to address some of those points, and welcome questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're back to the board for any further questions, discussion, or motion.
I'll move for approval of CU-17-24 with the following conditions. 1, this conditional use approval is limited to the design shown and discussed in the packet. And 2, street trees not more than 30 feet from center are required along the property frontage.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
Okay, so discussion.
When we come down to these duplexes, really the big question is,
Are you
no, I'm right
a
here
little
on it.
louder?
Is that not loud enough?
Yeah.
Okay. The big question we normally have on these types of questions for duplexes doesn't meet the UDO, because if we don't have a peculiar situation here, we can't deny it, right?
This is a little bit different than a variance. We don't really look at a peculiar condition. Our job is to assess, given the findings that have been proposed to us from staff, whether in our judgment, if we concur with those findings and accept them, or disagree and provide alternative findings. And I just want to clarify for everybody that the staff provides a staff report, and they provide a recommendation, and it's the Board of the Board of Zoning Appeals, who then looks at all the information, listens to the testimony, and makes the decision. Of course, the staff is talented and has a lot of expertise, but we're a volunteer board, and there's a reason for our function. We don't just take the staff report and rubber stamp it. We think about it, and often, not often, but sometimes we do disagree with it, and we find alternative findings. So I just wanted to point that out because there seemed to be some confusion as to what our role is, because if we just did or we just adopted what the staff report recommended, then there really would be no purpose for us spending our time here. So I just wanted to clarify that. So in this case, there are different criteria for the conditional use permit. So peculiar conditions
Well,
do
yeah, I
not
used the wrong term there,
apply.
but that was exactly what I wanted on the record, so.
Yeah, okay.
So that people understood what we
Yes.
can't do, and what we're trying to do here. Thank you.
Sure.
And then part of that too is because we've heard this, this is the third time, and one of the big objections we had last time was we had concerns it didn't meet the
Right.
code.
Right.
That was our big issue, and we asked the petitioner to address that. And what I'll ask now is, I'll lead with the question of, do you feel that the petitioner addressed some of those concerns from our last meeting?
You're asking me personally?
Yeah.
I think that I commend the petitioner for really taking seriously our comments, and thank you for doing that. I think it's met with mixed success, honestly. I think the parking, I think approach is greatly improved. I think that strategy serves everyone very well, and so I think that definitely is an improvement. I still believe if I were just to look at the street and see this new infill project inserted, I can't help but think that it just does not fit. I honestly was hoping to see the other solution, which had the story and a half, which brings that eave line down and really provides a direct relationship to all the one-story structures. And so this form loses that for me, and because it's shifted and you're highlighting sort of the tall, skinny nature of each individual unit, it reinforces the height difference. And so for me, formally, I don't think it's that successful. I don't think it's a bad building, but I just don't feel like it fits the context very well. Okay, so and for that reason, I'm not going to be able to vote for this project. Now, I do want to say that I was not present at the first hearing, but I believe that there was some feedback given at that first hearing that you chose not to act on. And it was only after the second hearing that we had in August that you were able that you then took the opportunity to respond. So I want to point out that the process was definitely expanded, and that obviously we were not able to meet 1 month, but the petitioner did not also take the opportunity after he received feedback from that first hearing to make some adjustments also. So I just think that's spread around, sort of why this process became as long as it has. And I do regret that. We never want to put anybody through a bunch of unnecessary meetings. And I do also recognize that it's hard for the public to come time after time. You have a dog in the race, and in a different way than members of the public. So we just want to be respectful of everybody's time, obviously. So that's the answer to the question that I would say. Anybody else have any further comments?
Yeah, I'll just say, I appreciate you explaining kind of our role here, because it's very clear what we're able to do, despite whatever opinions or politics we come from. We put that all aside. There's nothing to deal with politics. I think the findings of fact to go against staff findings are very weak. I think it checks, again, I've voted for this from the beginning. I will vote for it again because the purview that we see things through, along with what the staff finds, unless we find overwhelming evidence, findings of fact, to go contrary to those findings of staff, then we support it. And I don't see any facts in here other than maybe some architectural looks, but that's not even in the purview. So I think the UDO is very clear. Eric Grulich knows the UDO as well as anybody in this city. I'd put money on that. I think the purpose of the conditional uses for plexes was about affordability. Affordability is a math equation. You increase supply, you're going to help with affordability. It doesn't matter what type of housing. It doesn't matter if it's high-end luxury or if it's luxury student housing or if it's a $200,000 bungalow. Increasing supply helps with the affordability factor. I was at the city council meeting last night as well. I heard directly from that group. He said very clearly, and the petitioner said it as well, the plexes are the key to affordability, period. That's what he does for a living with the land trust, the Summit Hill Land Trust. So I think, for the public, and I appreciate, or volunteers as well, everybody's here on their own accord. I appreciate having this kind of engagement, but the time has come. I think everybody's time is valuable, all of us in this room. I wish the neighbors could have bought this. I wish you guys could have gone together and made it happen and put whatever you want there. But the fact is, the petitioner did. And the fact is, he checked all the boxes with this project from the beginning, and it continues to check all the boxes per the UDO, per regulations. And the final thing I'll say is, the buy right scenario in this is a worse scenario. The buy right product that he could put in there is enormous, is 5,000 to 6,000 square feet, is 3 stories. Buy right, no meetings, no questions, done. That's the alternative. So thinking about that for your neighborhood, that's what I come to. I think I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that for any of you. A 5,000 to 6,000, and it would sell. I can tell you that, it would sell for a very exorbitant amount of money to an individual who could afford it. That's not creating affordable housing. That's the antithesis of it in some ways. So I find that the findings of fact here are very, very strong. They have been from the beginning, and that's why I'll continue to support this. Thanks.
I have to agree. I agree with Tim on this one. And also, I need to, in terms of findings, we are not here to judge architectural standards or design standards. We are here to look at the UDO. Does it meet the UDO? Does it meet all the standards that are set in front of the owner by the city? Does this meet everything? So as Eric made his presentation today, he pointed out 4 factors, and all 4 factors this building meets. All the findings are being met. In terms of being ugly, beautiful, nice, we are not a design committee. We are here to make sure that the owner that purchases a home or decides to do a conditional use, that they follow what the UDO has set up for us. And it is following what the UDO is doing, so what the UDO is requiring. I commend the changes, I commend the sensibility with the neighbors, and when I look at the Elevate and I look at that whole block, it's already pretty mixed. I mean, on Henderson, you have 2 huge apartment buildings. They're, 8,000 square feet on one beside the other. There's another apartment building down the road that looks like a house, but it's actually apartments. And yes, there are some homes in the 1,500 square feet, but some of the homes are also 2,000. So when you look overall in that whole fabric there, things, and I don't know how those apartment buildings got allowed or whatever. I mean, it's already changing. There is a change. It's not cohesive. I appreciate you changing the gables. I think the design you had before with the gunshot, I mean, long building, that would have been really different from everything else. I do believe in I agree that affordable housing, the more homes we build, the more affordable homes we'll have. And we need it all. We need every type of home. Now, the high-end homes would help somebody move, yes, but it would be a little harder. And it would be problematic putting something there by right. And I know if this project doesn't work, you can put whatever you want there. I mean, you own the place. And by right, you can do whatever. So anyway, in sum, we are not here to look at design. We are here to look at the findings. Know that the findings follow the UDO. So they do. So if they do, I don't have an argument against the city's findings. So on that point, and that's my point, I'll be voting yes. So
I just want to follow up to it. I completely.
I think we have to have alternate findings eventually. If you're
Yeah,
gonna-
no, I
Yeah.
completely respect your opinion you guys have
Yeah.
been supportive of this project in whatever form it's been in since day one.
Yes.
So the UDO is not a checklist.
Correct.
Okay? It is, we use our discretion and we use our judgment. And when you go back and you look at the framing documents that the UDO, as our ordinance, is born out of, okay? There are a lot of things that we're trying to balance here. Obviously, we want more housing in our community. We want greater levels of affordability. That is part of the first goal, that is in this chapter, which deals with this area. The next thing that follows right after that in the comprehensive plan, guess what? It is housing, planning, and design, okay? Because in reality, what we're all left with is the form. It's how it sits on the street, how it interacts with the buildings around it, with the neighborhood that's around it. And I happen to be an architect, so form is really important to me, as you can tell. But I don't think that, I think that it is fair game here, okay? Because the UDO, as part of one of the criteria, talks about the size and the shape and the design. And so that opens the door for some feedback. I do agree that what was proposed in this iteration, I believe, is an improvement. I think you agree that it's an improvement. Design often is iterative. When you get feedback and it moves forward, you get to a different place where you have considered more points of view. And I think that this petition tonight benefits from that. I'm not saying it doesn't. I would love to see a duplex here, but I would like to see the right duplex here. And I just come from a school of thought where I think design, when done at a very high level, can be a win-win for everybody. And I just still see some shortcomings in this form. And I just think that anybody walks down the street, it's going to be a bit of an oddball. That's the way it's going to be, folks. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's fine. But I see that my purview allows for some discussion of form. And I don't shy away from that. I know not everybody feels comfortable talking about that. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
Can I?
No, please.
Can I ask you a question then?
Yeah,
A by right project that goes in there, he can make it whatever he wants.
he can.
It's a 6,000 square foot, 3-story house. Doesn't fit in, it doesn't matter. Will it happen? Not necessarily. It could.
I know,
I can
but
tell you from a real estate perspective, very much so. High-end luxury homes like that for those neighborhoods that this group can design would go there and would sell. So I think the by right part of it is where I come back to is I think we're getting into the weeds here of what the purview of. And I understand the design part. That's a small aspect. If it needed better design, I think then Eric, after 3 meetings that we've had here, would have spoken to that more. and he hasn't. So I feel like we can agree to disagree, but I think there's a very, very slippery slope here that we're opening up if this thing gets turned down. Because anybody else who's looking to develop a plex of any kind is going to think long and hard, because they're going to come back to what happened at these meetings when they were saying, oh, everything's supportive of this. The UDO is saying, yes, this checks all the boxes, but guess what? It's a no. They're going to go elsewhere. They will go elsewhere for a very good reason, and I can't blame them for that. And that's a big risk, I think, that we have control over through things like this.
I agree with you in that we don't want, we want to see plexes. That is something that is a value that's been put out there, that's in the code, and I agree with you. I agree with you. And I don't want to unnecessarily throw hurdles in people's path. I really, really don't. I really, really don't. And yeah, I just have a difference of opinion with you. Mm-hmm.
Could I make a comment regarding?
No, not at this time.
Yeah, so that I understand, so we could have alternate findings that talk about the design, some of the questions.
We could add alternate conditions.
Yeah. But what I'm hearing you say, though, Tim, is that essentially he could back off and say, okay, I'm just going to build a huge, that doesn't fit in that space.
Anybody can do that anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
So then the question really, I think, to you comes down to, do you feel that then this is a middle ground that we're trying to reach? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I think this is the best case scenario, because I think, again, everybody has the right to do this anywhere, that's correct, but we also have an opportunity here. The opportunity here is that it goes with the UDO for the majority of the findings, and it also impacts affordable housing. That's the 1-2 of the boxes we have to check. So to me, this is the middle ground. This is the best case scenario.
Do you feel like the changes that have been made, though, have been effective?
Yeah, I do. I think the petitioner has listened. I think there's been engagement. It may not be what you guys want as the public. It's never going to be, unless you buy the property and put it up yourself. That's really the bottom line. And part of this is, and I appreciate the opinions, but in the free market economy that we're a part of, this is what happens. This is what is allowed to happen. A person is able to go in and purchase the property and put together whatever they want. And any of you could have done that. And it didn't happen. So that may be unfortunate, but I come back to, for what can go here, what's allowed to go here, the buy right scenario, to me, for you in the neighborhood, is a worst case scenario. A huge home can go in there. That to me is not, that won't fit in, but he doesn't have to come before us and check anything there, any of the architecture. He could just go in. I think that's risky. I think that's a big, big risk that we shouldn't be taking when we have the 1 and the 2 checked here.
Joe, do you want to share some thoughts with us?
No, I think that it's, that's what Tim's saying. It's good. It's a lot to think about, because it is, this has gone on, and I'm trying to consider whether, any more continuances are going to get us anywhere, because the petitioner could, as was stated, just drop out and say, okay, I'm just going to build a 3-story house. So I mean, we're in a precarious situation right now in this meeting as to what's the best way forward, so that everyone maybe compromises a little bit, but it moves down the road. And I guess what I'm asking at this point then is, how do you see this going forward if it were to continue?
I personally, look, I don't think it's two homes side by side. So I don't think the size is at all, for me, an issue. It's more related to form. And if we were to add a condition that I don't know. I just feel it doesn't relate to the houses around it, and so I think the story and a half that was from the last proposal, if we're in the right orientation, is a form that is much more suitable to this location. Now, I can't, whatever, that's not what he brought forward tonight, so, I don't want to continue. I don't want to
Understood.
continue again.
Go ahead.
Excuse me. What condition are you, specifically are you talking about?
I don't know, it feels like it's strong-arming it to say it needs to be this form. I mean, for me, I would want to see a story and a half. I think the plan could be easily adapted to a story and a half.
Yeah, and I think he had in there the original elevation, right, or not?
Yeah, Eric, can you please put the other?
Yeah, just to show the old and new. I couldn't find that in my packet, but, so, just to be clear, that's a significant change, right, between looking at the side of the house, essentially, and then this new one. And so you're saying that you just feel like instead of having the gables, et cetera, on that second, that's really your biggest issue with that?
It's two full stories. It's a two-story house.
Uh-huh.
And Eric, could you put up the other elevation, the side elevation from the previous one? So the long one, okay, so that is the second story is carved out of the roof volume. The eave is pulled down, so it establishes, it relates to a one-story context.
Go
Which
back,
is
Eric.
all the other buildings on that side of the street, which specifically the UDO tells us to look at, are all one-story buildings. I understand the need for a second story, but architecturally, that's the way you do it successfully. It was what he had before, has that relationship.
Can I make a quick point? Eric, at our last meeting, when I asked at the end of the discussion if we could give architectural guidance of some kind, do you remember your response?
Yes,
When
I
I
did.
said
and it would be
specifically,
the
so when we
same
come
thing.
back to this meeting, we are very clear on what can be presented and the architectural guidance we can give. And what was your response?
Yep, so our response was we did not want the board to be a design review committee. Your goal is to respond
I know,
to
I
what is
know.
presented to you.
Right.
I know.
So, as we mentioned and as is on the screen here, there are very specific design elements that the duplexes are supposed to be evaluated on. The roof pitch, front porch width and depth, front building setback, and vehicle parking access. The overall size is not one of those.
Sure. Right, and that's not really what's being talked about, but, no, I get it, I understand.
Well, so the last thing I'm going to ask is, so what would you propose would be, you were saying to have a stipulation on the motion? Was that your last position?
Yeah, I don't know if it's fair game to add a conditional,
And just, for my, because I'm trying to process all this, what would that be?
I don't know, Eric, would it be fair game to just have it be a story and a half roof form?
I would be very hesitant that the board should dictate that specific element.
Okay,
Certainly,
yeah,
I would
it
look to
feels-
our
it
legal
feel- if-
counsel if they have
I-
anything to add, but that particular element is not one of the design elements that we look at. It is simply the roof pitch. So, in that context, I would phrase it as, if you have a neighborhood block where you've got everything with a 10-12 or 12-12 pitch roof, and somebody wants to come in with a flat roof, ultra-modern house, that would not be a compatible roof pitch. So that's really kind of in essence what the roof pitch element here was trying to embody, was that you've got a similar roof pitch shape. Not one story, two story, or overall massing, but just, generally keeping the look and feel of roof pitches in the neighborhood. So I would be very hesitant to, give specific guidance of change this to that.
Okay, I understand, I agree. Right,
I'll go ahead and call a question then if we're done talking. I don't know what more to, I don't know what more to bring up.
this is the proposal in front of us, we accept it or we deny it. Okay, so we're ready for a vote.
And real quick, I apologize, who was the second?
Flavia was the
Flavia
second.
was the second.
I was the second.
Okay, thank you very much. So the roll call is to approve with the 2 conditions stated in staff report. Clapper,
No.
Throckmorton,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Bowler,
Yes.
Okay, the petition passes. Good luck.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
And we are adjourned. Thanks.